All right, welcome into another day on our daily Devos in December. Christmas Eve. Christmas Eve is upon us. That is what I'm talking about. Hope that you're ready for Christmas. Hope you have some good plans in front of you to celebrate with friends, with family. Looking forward to church today, having candlelight in the service and Christmas carols and reading the Christmas story and just getting to wrap up our Advent journey with the Advent of love, and excited about getting to talk about God's love today. But today for our devotional, I wanted to just go randomly, maybe into the book of Galatians chapter 4, verses 4 through 7, and it says this. When the time came to completion, God sent his son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those under the law, so that we might receive adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God sent the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, crying, Abba, Father. So you are no longer a slave, but a son, and if a son, then God has made you an heir. And obviously there's some pretty incredible promises in this little section of scripture. The fact that we are no longer slaves, but we are sons. And when you're a son, you're an heir. And to all you women out there, yes, it includes you, sons and daughters of God, family, brought in through Jesus Christ, making room for us to be grafted in. But the part that I really wanted to hone in on is verse 4. It says, when the time came to completion. The King James Version is famous for having translated it this way, when the fullness of time had come. And that is kind of where my brain was going, because I was thinking about Christmas Eve, the day before Jesus comes. And for us, as we celebrate it right now, we know that, obviously there's lots of debate on what day Jesus was born. But if you're going to celebrate it on a particular day, right, we have chosen a particular day to celebrate it on. So we know that tomorrow is the day. But if you go back to everyone that was waiting around for the Messiah, hoping and praying and believing and all those things, you have to think that it had already been, even just the time between the Old Testament and the New Testament was stretching into about 400 years. And there had been a Messiah promised really since the garden. So we're talking a promise that's over, at that point, 4,000 years old. And yet they're still holding on, still believing, still asking God to do the thing that he's promised to do. And there might be discouragement and there might be weariness. Because even later in Galatians, it challenges the Christians at the churches in Galatia to not grow weary in well-doing, to not give up, because in due season you will reap if you faint not, if you don't give up, if you don't fall back. So obviously, there's a challenge with endurance. And there's a challenge with maybe allowing what you're in the middle of to convince you that God has forgotten his promises, or that you've done something so bad that you have broken God's ability to fulfill those promises. And so I was thinking about the shepherds out in the field at night. Who knows, who knows if they had hardly any inclination towards the Lord, but obviously God sent angels to tell them that Jesus had arrived. But what might they have been facing? And then all of a sudden, the promise that had been present for so many years had finally come to pass. So much so that they dropped everything they were doing to run and go check it out. We have to go and see this thing we've been told about. And so I just wanted you to meditate on it a little bit today, that because I think whether big or small, we face some of the same things today. We know that God's going to come through in some kind of way in the midst of this situation that you might be in. But God's timing is rarely the timing that we have. God's plan rarely looks like the plan that we have laid out. And so we can become discouraged, and it goes all the way back to the garden where the serpent came and talked to Eve and was like, hey, Eve, there's that tree over there, and God said you can't touch it. And so, if she had held on to a belief that God was going to work the best plan for her, then she wouldn't have been interested in speeding up the plan. If she believed that God's timing and his plan were the best, that he's trustworthy, that he's good, that he's faithful, then she wouldn't have needed to go the route of eating the fruit and getting Adam to eat the fruit and all of the reality that we now live in, right? So to look back on the very first Christmas Eve, nobody knew it was Christmas Eve. That's the kind of the mystery of it all. Nobody knew that it was Christmas Eve. Nobody knew that it was kind of the darkest night before the brightest dawn. And so I just wanted to have us think about where you're at in regards to the promises God has spoken over your life, and whether you're still hanging on to those, whether you're still believing in those, whether you're still being faithful to continue to plod away at the things that you know to do. Go into all the world, preach the gospel, make disciples, be faithful, obedient, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your mind, your strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. Like, we know those things don't change. Those are our set standing orders, if you will. And so today I want you to just think about Christmas Eve. I want you to think about the night before the promises were fulfilled. Hundreds of promises fulfilled in one moment. A beautiful testimony of God's faithfulness. I want you to think about Christmas Eve as a testimony to God's faithfulness, so that no matter what you are facing right now, you can look to Christmas Eve, you can look to the Christmas story, and you can say, wow, God is faithful. Sometimes his time frame, sometimes his timeline is much different than mine, but I know he's going to meet me in my place. He's going to sustain you. He's going to hold you up. He's going to be your fortress, your refuge, your strong tower in time of need. So I just want to encourage you today. Think about Christmas Eve, the first Christmas Eve ever, and just some of the dynamics that were at play in that day. And let's celebrate the faithfulness of God, his ability to keep a promise, and then let's tell someone about it. Tell someone about the incredible faithfulness of God. I hope you have a great day, and Merry Christmas coming up tomorrow, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.